Hello, welcome to this live session. I apologize, I have a mic and it, for whatever reason, is not working. So you're going to have to bear with me on the audio, but I am working on getting better sound in addition to lighting. So bear with me on that, but I am excited. I get to see some of you at AO Live coming up. I look forward to meeting some of the new members, talking to some of the older ones. It'll be a lot of fun. So to get to know each of you. So super excited about that. As always, just want to point out that all the questions I'm going to answer today, I'm just giving you one data point from my experience. I'm super, there's a lot of different other people, other mentors, and it's exciting to see how many there are right now. But kind of take all that data and add it together and get a full, true answer that applies best to your situation. Because again, we have a paragraph to go over, so some of the stuff that I talk about today may or may not apply, but hopefully can help you regardless of whether or not you submitted a question. So with that said, I will roll right into this and answer the first question, and that is from Corey Stevens. Corey asked, how can I overcome the fear of starting a conversation with someone? And then business description and background. I'm in network marketing. I am looking to build relationships with people. I am great interacting one-to-one with people, but when the conversation is flowing, but when it comes to starting a conversation with a complete stranger, I feel like something's just blocking me. I go through the conversation in my head and it sounds great. And then when it actually comes to starting the conversation, I just have this mental block and procrastinate over doing it. What can I do to overcome this? So a couple things here, Corey. The first I would say is that one, if I'm taking your question kind of at face value here, but I would say that if you're you're starting a conversation with the intention of getting to a specific point, and basically what I mean by that is selling them something, you're always going to struggle. It's going to be difficult because the conversation is not genuine. You have a agenda that's pretty, besides just networking, that's pretty specific. And so you're going to be trying to steer that conversation and get it to where you want to go. And they're not necessarily a willing participant in that. So keep that in mind. But if you're asking just at face value, how do you overcome that fear of starting a conversation with someone? A couple things I would say is, one, by just doing it. Force yourself to do it. And if that's something that you want to actually practice, there's a lot of ways to do that. You can go out and say, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to force myself to have 5 conversations in an hour with just complete strangers to get to know them a little better. And then do that. You'll get over that fear rapidly if you actually just go and do it. The one thing I'd say that Tim Ferriss does is it's an exercise called fear setting, and essentially you can Google that and look it up. But the real question is what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen that's so bad in that conversation nothing's going to ruin your life. Nothing's going to be that bad. But we build these things up in our head, and we have these kind of played out scenarios where we think it's going to be so bad. And the reality is it's never that bad. So do that with yourself. Google it. He's wrote a blog on it. He's done some podcasts on it. But he calls the exercise fear setting, and it's really just looking at what's the worst that could actually happen. And then the second thing I would say there is when you're starting those conversations, look for things or identify things that they're genuinely interested in. And what I mean by that is you can see things about people, somebody that puts extra effort into how they dress, or, little things, simple as the Apple Watch. Like, oh, you're really into fitness. I saw your Apple Watch. I was thinking about getting one of those. Has it helped you? Start a conversation on things they're genuinely interested in, and you're going to get a much better response versus kind of having that subtext in your mind of, I want to get this conversation to selling something. So that's my advice. I hope it helps, but some things to consider. The next question is from Martina, and the question is, what sort of strategy do I have to achieve my target for this month to reach 2,500 points, last minute goal? Business description and background of question. I'm Herbalife marketing and personal training industry all online. This month, my goal is to get over, or even better, over 2,500 points, which seems like a mission. I've been messaging people, adding people on social media, Facebook and Instagram, but not having much luck. How do I efficiently attract and sell my nutrition programs? Thank you for the help. So I don't know how far you're into this. Martina. I know this. I've seen this question a couple other times for a couple other mentors. But here's what I would say on this. Number one thing is, have you identified your absolute core customer, like who that really is? Have you really dug into that? Your product is not for everyone, and your story is not going to resonate with everyone. And so if you're not identifying that core, kind of that core person that you're really there to serve, and you're just trying to shotgun blast and say, I want to get 2,500 points, again, I think your focus is all wrong there. Your focus is focusing on what benefits me versus what benefits the person I'm serving. And because if you really start focusing on the person or your client and what actually benefits them, what provides real value to them, that's where you're going to start seeing more customers come in and you're getting those bigger sales, and they're going to want that stuff. And one way to do that is take a look at the people that are currently buying from you and really dig in on what do they have in common. So if it's a group of overweight mothers who are struggling because they're trying to raise their children and maintain their weight, you look for those things that are common across the board, and then you hone in on that and you identify with that. Then start looking at where do they hang out, where do they spend their time at, what do they have in common, all these little things, and then nail it down. Most people I see don't know who their core client is, and the reason for that is because they want everybody to be their client, and they want all 7 billion people on the planet Earth to be their client, and who wouldn't, right? But the problem is that your message and the story you're trying to share and the value you provide isn't to 7 billion people, it's to a very small group. With my current company, Night Shift Nutrition, that I'm trying to kind of get off the ground, I am looking at identifying very specifically who the core customer is going to be. And I've kind of narrowed it down. So if you look at from a reoccurring revenue stream of $100 a month for this product, and you might be able to do the same thing with Herbalife here, I need 834 people per month with a reoccurring revenue of $100 to get to $1 million company a year. I don't need 7 billion people. I need 834. And if you look at that from a 8-figure perspective, then I need 8,340. I'm trying to identify my key 8,340 people that I want for a client, and I'm not worried about anybody else. And those are the people I'm going to serve, and that's who I'm going to really work on bringing in and providing that real value to. Last thing I'd ask is, who does your story resonate with? Think about your story, your background, and that's going to tell you who you can serve as well. So, all right, next question. This one is from Yolandi. Question that she asked was, I feel like I need to stop, go back, and restart with the basics. I had already started my business when I joined AO, and I don't have the basic foundation and processes down. Where do you recommend I start? I need clear vision and roadmap and projections on where I'm going and how to get there. And then she goes into it. We manufacture decorative pillows. The potential for growth is huge. We currently do about $15,000 a month, but I need to at least double and triple that. I can't scale haphazardly. This needs to be very calculated and planned. So, all right, Yolandi, first off, I went to your website. It's awesome. It excites me as someone who's getting into kind of e-commerce to see that kind of stuff and that your success. Step back for just a second. You're at $15,000 a month. I can tell you this, that you've already beat the average entrepreneur who starts a business in the United States. You've already beat them. That is awesome. So celebrate that. And then let's dig into your problem a little bit. So you talk about stopping. Don't do that. You've got a great product already. My question would be, I say this all the time, is how do you eat an elephant? And that's one bite at a time. Business is messy, and it's always going to be, and you're always going to feel like there's 800 other things to do in your business, and there always will be 800 other things to do in your business. But don't stop anything. Keep chipping away at it, improving. Incremental improvements over time are going to add up to massive success. Now, you've answered your own question here. Like, where do I recommend I start? I need a clear vision. You answered your own question in that sentence alone. That's exactly what you need. Start with the end in mind. So where do you want your business to be in 10 years? And this is an exercise that I know that Sean's gone through, that JT's gone through at some of the live events, but where do you want your business to be in 10 years? If you don't know that, you don't have a clear path and you don't have a vision. It's hard to know what to do this week if you don't know where you want to go at all. It's often called the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. But from there, you start breaking it down. So in my company, Guardian Security, what we do, we have a BHAG. We have this massive goal, and then every 3 years, I put out a vision. So I've done the first one. We're about a year and a half through that, and every single detail about where we want the company to be in 3 years, from the number of employees to the revenue to how we're going to provide our service, our values, everything like that is laid out in this 3-year vision. That is where we're trying to be, and that is our core focus. But that's great. So it's great to have a vision. Where a lot of people fall off on this, though, is the execution piece. So how do you break that 3-year vision, because that's a long time frame, into an executable kind of framework? Again, I can only speak from my experience, but what we do is we break it down into 12-week cycles. So I know a lot of people talk about year goals, and that's great. Have year goals or focus on a year. But when you focus on a year, what I see a lot of times is people procrastinate. It's like, oh, it's a year off. I have time. I'll push this off a little. I'll push it off, push it off, push it off. I like to have my team. We meet once every 12 weeks, and we come up with a 12-week plan of how we're going to work towards the vision, what piece we're going to chip off of that 3-year vision and build out and execute on. And so, and we break it down by the week. And everybody at the end of this meeting, it's kind of an all-day event, but they'll have a 12-week plan laid out of week by week, what they're going to do, the key steps and sub-steps for each of that. And then what I do is I take all those things and I put it together and I say, okay, in 12 weeks, and I'll lay out what the company's going to look like. And everybody gets on board. It gets people excited because, like, man, that's a lot better version of this company. And in just 12 weeks. But it also keeps key team members kind of working on the company, not just in it. And then from there, we meet once a week, every Monday at 4 p.m. We have our weekly accountability meeting, a WHAM, and we go over the previous week. Did we do it? And if not, why not? What are we stuck on? What do we need help with? What do we need to get back on track? And then if, what we're also doing next week as well. And so again, the same things apply. Anything we're going to be stuck on, any issues we're facing, constraints that we need to identify now and that we need help working through. And then finally, and I don't know that you necessarily would need this level if it's just you and your you and your daughter, but we also have a daily huddle. And so every day we meet 15 minutes, 3 questions, 7:30 in the morning. Each team member senior leader kind of rolls through, which is what's the most important thing I'm doing today for the 12-week plan? What am I stuck on or need help with? And what does the team need to know? And it's just like bam, 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 and we roll through it. So I'm just to recap that a little bit, going back from the other direction. So our daily huddles inform our weekly accountability meetings. Our weekly accountability meetings drive the execution piece for our 12-week plan. What do we want to look like as a company in 12 weeks? And that is based on our 3-year vision for the company, which is finally based on the BHAG, this massive, hairy, audacious goal that we want to reach in about 10, 12, 15 years, somewhere out there. But you answered that question and you know that. So what I would recommend doing is stepping away from your office or wherever you work out of, getting somewhere else, possibly with your daughter, and developing that vision. Where do we want to be at? And then setting the steps backwards over time to how you're actually going to get there. If you come up with a vision and you don't have a plan to execute, you're wasting your time. So many people have these grand visions and then they never do anything with them, and you're wasting your time building it. So again, create that vision, come up with an executable plan. I can send you that in a flow chart if you'd like, about how our kind of process works from the execution to the vision piece. Just shoot me a message on Facebook or comment in the section. But let's move on to the next question. All right, this question is also from Corey. Corey asks, when do you know if it's the right time to approach your prospect with your product or opportunity? Background question or business description: I am an independent distributor for a global health and wellness company, network marketing. After establishing a relationship with the prospect and building rapport with them, how will you know when it's the right time to approach them with your opportunity or product? How will you go about approaching them with what you have to offer? So first off, there is no perfect time, Corey, and there never will be. The only perfect time really is pretty much now or yesterday. Sure, you want to build that relationship and build that rapport, but there is no perfect time. If you sit there and wait for the perfect time again, you're never going to do it. I'm actually seeing kind of a trend on the questions overall, and a lot of this is just it comes back to some hesitancy, and people are just not taking that actual action step. They kind of know the piece they need to do, and they're not doing it. So if you have somebody you've built rapport with and you've got a relationship with them, then that's the perfect time to approach them. You already have that stuff. But I do want to give you kind of some, I don't know, some other advice. So I got on your Facebook page. I sent you a message on there through your app about asking what your services were. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not very clear on what it is that you're selling. I would consider this, that you probably, and there's a lot of stuff on the AO portal. If you go into the resources, you can look at messaging and branding and that sort of stuff. I get that it's, I guess, something to do with filtered water, maybe ionic, adding some kind of something to them, electrolytes and some other stuff. But then it also kind of seems like maybe you want people to come work for you to be the next level of that distribution channel. And then when you responded, it was the same thing. I didn't get any real sense of what, did you want me to join you? Did you want to sell me some water? I would get clear on your message. And something to consider is that just be passionate about what you're selling. And if you find other people that buy your product and they're passionate about it, then maybe you approach those people about it, about selling the product as well. But again, I would really consider going back and dialing in that messaging, because it just wasn't 100% clear on the things that you were trying to sell or what your main focus or priority was for your business. So just some thoughts. Again, feel free to message me if that's not clear. But moving into the next question. So this one is from Matthew. Matthew asks, how do you approach a business partner when your responsibilities have become more than the original agreement for a percentage in the company? Background, our company sells a bike product that creates sparks as you willy. I was invited to start this business and lead the product development for a 12% stake in the company. Now my business partner has me doing, and then a bunch of other stuff, and you no longer feel like that's really something that you're doing a lot more than what you originally agreed to, and you're asking whether or not you should where you should approach for additional compensation or just kind of remain where you're at, be happy with your percentage. Here's my advice on this, and again, I do have some advice with frustrating business partners and equity split percentages, but you need to have the conversation, and it just needs to be an open and honest conversation. One of the biggest problems that I see in any relationship, whether that's business, whether it's personal, it always stems back to unmet expectations. And I think I've said this on a previous one of these lives, but it stems back to people having some kind of expectation and that expectation not being met. So in your case, you have an expectation of, I was going to do X, and now I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And when you're doing all of those extra things, now you're going to start to get a little bit bitter, a little bit cynical about this kind of stuff, and it's just going to fester. And it's going to make this more and more difficult. You're not going to be focused on what's important, which is, your 12% and getting that business off the ground and developing those next products. So have that conversation. It's not going to be easy for you. It never is on these kind of conversations. And I don't know who the main equity partner is and how they are and how they react to these sorts of things. The partner that we ended up getting rid of did not react well. But you have to have the conversation, because what's worse to you is that it just kind of festers with you and you get more and more unhappy with where you're at and bitter, and it's not worth it. So, now I hate to give a kind of flip side of this. I have no idea what your business is worth. If you have 12% of Amazon, I'd probably let it slide. But based on the things that you're saying, it's probably not that. And that's more of a joke than anything. But keep in mind that I'm just giving you some advice from my experience and having kind of a similar conversation in the past. Don't let it hang. Have the conversation and do it sooner rather than later. All right, next question. And this one is from Shelly. Shelly asked, what is your recommendation for handling the stress created from employee mistakes that you have to go back and fix? And she is in the fire protection business. She had a contractor, an employee that's no longer with her, who made a pretty major mistake and just extremely upsetting, extremely stressful, asking how you can handle this stress. So Shelly, again, my advice is based on my experience and how I handle stress. And I can tell you this, that one, I think it's very, very important to have somebody that you can vent to. So you've got to get that out and not just to yourself. That's part of it. But for me, then it's followed by some kind of physical activity. And a big one is I will go walk. I will go walk for 30 minutes, an hour, and I'll get it out of my head. I almost always feel better after that. I work through a solution in my head, and I'll walk as long as it takes, but there's a lot of science behind that too. There's a lot of science showing that physical activity reduces stress, that doing something and being active, even not necessarily in that moment, but over time as well, makes you better able to adapt to stressors like this. So having that sort of physical fitness program kind of matters quite a bit too. But my honest answer is what I do. I have my CFO. I'm going to call him, I'm going to yell at him a little bit, not at him, but about whatever the situation is. Then I'm probably going to go walk and get this out of my head. I'm going to solve the problem in my head and then come back and physically solve whatever that problem is. Because at the end of the day, you have to work through your issues, right? But working through your issues when you're in a really bad place does not help you. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's a super simple answer, but there's so much science behind physical activity and how it relates to stress. You know, when you have that massive kind of fight or flight reaction and you just get a dump of cortisol. There's a lot of activity or a lot of science that shows that being physically active helps reduce that response. Okay, next question. And this one is from Ricardo, and he asked, should my business have an employee handbook or operations manual? I have a barbershop. I'm looking to build the brand behind it. I want my business to be able to scale in the most smoothest way possible. That way I can get investors interested in it. Yes, you should absolutely have all those things. So an employee handbook is vital for a bunch of reasons. Kind of helps onboard the employee. There's some legal reasons you should have it as well. Kind of protect yourself, to set some standards from the beginning. You can listen. There's all kinds of places online you can get kind of for standard employee handbooks. If you want, message me after this, and I'll shoot you Guardian's employee handbook. It's a little bit different than yours, being in security, and we have to say things like, no, you can't carry handcuffs, versus what you're going to do. But it'll give you an idea of places to start and all the stuff that we kind of include in there. So employee handbook, absolutely. Operations manual, yes. Like all these are super big yeses. So, but it's more than operations manual. So that's just one aspect of your business. And especially if you want to be attractive to investors, but if you want to build a business that functions outside of you, it can't be all in your head. So if you look at most businesses have 5 to 7 processes, main big processes that make up their overall business. Your business is probably no different, such as HR. So you'll have that process where you search for people, you find them, you hire them, how you, onboard them, how you retain them, and then also how you fire them. Having that stuff documented, again, protects you legally, but it also shows how you're going to do something, and lets other people, when you bring on underneath you to kind of manage those processes, build that consistency in your product. The marketing process is another big one. Again, a lot of resources on the AO portal that you can dig into, everything I'm going to talk about right now, but how do you get your message to your target audience? That's what, a very kind of simplistic version of what marketing is. And then very much related to that is the sales process. So now that you've connected to your audience, how are you converting them? Other ones include, the operations process, which you mentioned. How do you deliver your product or service, and kind of breaking that down step by step. In your case, it's a barbershop. I don't know what all you offer, but all those things, breaking them down. Again, because you want consistency, and if you want to scale and you want to attract investors, you have to be consistent. McDonald's, if you, again, look at the Ray Kroc movie, which I haven't actually watched, but like 30 minutes of it, but enough to see that their big thing was processes. And they wanted to show, how do we get the people to do the same exact thing over and over again, and how do we move that to other locations? You can't scale a business if everything is completely different. It's not scaling a business, it's creating separate businesses. So documenting an operations process, I really recommend, what I'm fond of in my business is kind of that's just prefaced with a checklist. Did I do X? Did I do Y? Did I do Z? Etc. And going down that, something that's easy to reference, easy to follow, and easy to come back and say, hey, listen, this is part of our process. You didn't do this part of it, and going into and enabling that corrective training of sorts. But that's extremely important if you want to scale. You have to have consistency. Something else, how do you retain your customers? So you have somebody come in for a shave or a haircut or whatever. How do you get them to come back the second time? The retention process. And then finally, kind of your financial or accounting process. That's obviously a major one, and just kind of PS, cash flow matters. That's the one thing I think that people just don't seem to get a lot of times starting out a business, but it's also cited 82% of the time why small businesses fail, at least partially, is because they don't understand how cash flow affects the growth of their business, and they end up outpacing their cash flow. So again, it's not just, yes, you should have the manual for the operations process. Yes, you should have an employee handbook, but you absolutely need to document all your processes. And don't worry, man, it takes time, but you need to do it. You need to be aware you're doing it. And if you're going to scale, again, creating these processes, and then so you can move to, say, a second location and saying, okay, I'm going to hire out all these people. I'm going to bring them in. How do you train them? Are you going to train them with what you know in your head? I mean, how does that, again, if you're talking about scaling, that doesn't work. So it's nailing down the 5 to 7 processes that make up your company, that are how you function, that getting them on paper, creating them in something that's simple and easy to reference, and then making sure that your people are following them. And then you can scale. Then you can scale it out. Then what you're building now is future managers in your place where you can move them to other locations and build your processes out, because they know your process and they know it from a manual, not because it's stuck in their head. And then they go and create their own little fiefdom over in some other place. So yes, anybody watching this, get it on paper. Get your processes on paper. You cannot tweak a process if it's in your head. You're just like, oh, I have this idea, and you keep coming up with these different things. You create a process, you get it down, put it on paper, and then you start getting it right. You start tweaking it. You make those adjustments, but you can't go back and really make effective adjustments when it's just in your head. And then the only place you're making it is in your head, and so it doesn't translate. But absolutely, that's a definite yes. You need an employee handbook. You need an operations manual. Happy to send you our employee handbook. Just message me on Facebook Messenger, and I'll get that to you. All right. I believe this is the last question. Unless I missed a page, they're all right. And this one's from AJ. And AJ asked, how do you overcome the fear of disappointing people? I constantly struggle with the balance of standing up for the best interests of my business and family versus telling people things that I'm afraid will disappoint them. What tactics, mindset, strategy, etc. do you use to help yourself say what truly needs to be said and accept whatever the outcome is? Thanks. Okay, so AJ, hey, listen, yeah, that's just part of being a human, right? Sometimes it's hard to tell people things you know they don't want to hear. And so it is something that you need to get better about. At the very beginning, I talked about the exercise that Tim Ferriss likes to do, which is fear setting. And I would apply this to your question as well. What's really the worst thing that's going to happen? And the odds are that no matter what you come up with in your head when you're working through that exercise and determine what's the worst thing that happen, it's not going to be near as bad. But the worst thing that happen is it's usually not that big of a deal. I can tell you though, when it does turn into a big deal is when you hold it inside and you don't have these conversations, and it eats away at you and eats away at you and eats away at you. And then it just becomes a much, much, much more painful event than it needs to be. And again, the theme of these questions today seems to be like people they know they need to do something and they just need a little push to do it. Go do it. Set a rule with yourself that the second you have bad news, that you make that call or visit that person immediately. Don't let that stuff sit. I can tell you this, bad news, and there's this saying in the military and maybe elsewhere, I don't know, but bad news does not get better with age. Like the longer you hold bad news in, it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better for you. It doesn't get better for the person you need to tell it to. So go tell them. And again, force yourself to do that. But from a psychological standpoint, holding that stuff in is absolutely terrible for you, and it doesn't improve your relationship with whoever you need to get that message across to, and it certainly doesn't get better with time. Like I said, bad news does not get better with time. So think about it. The worst thing that can happen is probably really not that bad. And then go do it. Just go do it. As Nike is. But make it a rule, like I said, that when you have bad news, you're going to go tell people. And I know I'm repeating myself there a bunch, but it's a simple answer. Take that action, though. The theme seems to be nobody's wanting to take action, and taking action is absolutely critical to being a successful entrepreneur, more than just about anything else. Because if you don't take that first step, you'll never get anywhere. Hey, so that covers all the questions. I appreciate everybody that is watching this or will watch it. Like I said, I've got the mic. I just, for whatever reason, can't get it working, but we'll get the sound improved next time. And I look forward to meeting a lot of you at AO Live and talking with you more there. If you have any questions, if there's anything I can do for you outside of this, feel free to message me on Facebook. Shoot me a message. I told you several of you to do that for like the employee handbook and some other things, but absolutely happy to help you outside of this. If it's something that's outside of my area of expertise or something my area of experience, I'll let you know. It's no big deal. So again, I appreciate your time today. Wish everybody best of luck and look forward to meeting some of you guys at AO Live.